Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Burden of Power, a legal thriller, by Joe Cargile, narrated by Michael Butler Murray. Part 1. The Arraignment. 1. The crowd waited at the edge of the barricades, lining the north end of the courthouse square. Donning ponchos and sharing umbrellas, collections of serious faces stood huddled together in small packs. Their cardboard signs bore scrawled attacks on the judiciary, verses from the new and old, and slogans from the movement. Prepared to exercise rights, namely those guaranteed by the First Amendment, the people on the square showed resilience as they suffered under sheets of heavy rain. Unwilling to break ranks, even as the weather worsened across much of the region, the mob appeared ready for a storm in Blake County. From a large window on the second floor of the Blake County Courthouse, the Honorable Judge J. Balk stood alone. He considered the faces in the crowd that waited below, listening as their muffled chants entered into the safety of his chambers. They were into hour 4 of the protest, and the tension brought on by the agitators had begun to unnerve all who waited inside the walls of the old building, including the judge. "They just keep on coming," he murmured, as he performed another rough head count of those on the square, his third of the day. When he lost count, somewhere after 200, he cursed under his breath. "Where in the hell are all these people even coming?" A knock sounded from the door to the judge's chambers, but he made no move to answer it. Instead, he kept his eyes on the scene below, still considering the unfamiliar faces in the crowd. 25 years on the bench. Another 14 before that spent practicing in courtrooms throughout South Georgia. John Balk knew his circuit well, especially those who hailed from Blake County. These weren't them. Another knock at the door, this time louder, before it opened. The judge's attention stayed on the square and out-of-towners below. "Your Honor," began a voice from the doorway. Sheila Lambert, his secretary, got straight to it. "2 men from the senator's security detail are waiting at the back door to the courthouse. They've asked to speak with you before." "That'll be fine," Balk said, without glancing in her direction. "Go ahead and send them up." A pause. "Yes, sir." As he heard the door begin to close, another chant began stirring in the crowd outside. This one directed a crude attack at the special prosecutor who'd been assigned to handle the controversial case. John Balk sensed his secretary still stood at the doorway. Together, they listened as the words intruded on his chambers. In unison, louder and louder. "The hoe must go! The hoe must go! The hoe must go!" Balk turned from the window and found Sheila standing where he expected. She wore a conservative dress, dark purple, along with an expression that matched his own. Almost gleefully, the crowd continued. "The hoe must go! The hoe must go!" Balk waited another moment for her to turn and leave. Sheila stayed put, though, as she seemed to consider him from where she stood. The two communicated easily, without words. He knew her moods, and she his. Their sense for the other helped avoid conflict, except when the judge decided to poke the bear for his amusement. "Quite the welcome party outside," Balk said, once it became apparent that she planned to stay for conversation. Sheila hadn't talked to him all morning, a sign that she'd been stewing over the situation at hand. "How long would you say they been out there waiting on our man to arrive?" "Our man?" The judge noted the cool response. He tiptoed on, aiming only to loosen the mood. "I'd say it's been at least 4 hours, right?" She nodded. "At least." "That wind out there reminds me of the last time I canceled court." Balk grinned. "We had that hurricane party out on the lake." She didn't bite. "We remember it differently, then?" He nodded. "That's my mistake." "It's okay," she replied, pausing as rain began again against the window. We all make mistakes, John. The rain outside looked to be the tail end of the storm, one that had conveniently, maybe providentially, prevented all aircraft from landing that morning at the county's small airport. The weather had also delayed all court proceedings, including an arraignment calendar set to be called in Blake County Superior Court. Cases set for arraignment usually ran as efficient little hearings that offered zero appeal for courtroom spectators. Usually didn't apply to State of Georgia v. William H. Collins, a case that was the first of its kind. Nor would it. 2. The ping-ping of a notification sounded from a nearby cell phone. "I have a message here from one of the agents, Judge." Sheila Lambert paraphrased what she read from the screen of her iPhone. "Says his last name is O'Connor." Balk kept his attention on the secretary, waiting to hear more. "The senator's plane is on the ground, apparently, and they'll be keeping him at a secure location for now. They also want to meet." "Anything else?" Sheila looked up from the phone, shook her head. "Secure location," Balk grunted. "We have one of those here at the county jail, too." "You've locked up people for less, Judge." She didn't hesitate in her advice. "They should be required to give you his whereabouts, right? The man is charged with a serious—" "I know what the man is charged with," Balk said, waving her off. "I'll tell his security boys to drop the secrecy with this office. Besides that, there isn't much else I can do until he's here." "Why not a bench warrant?" she asked, pushing back. Another round of protesting began from the crowd outside. The interruption gave the judge a moment to consider his secretary's words. She watched him closely, waiting for him to respond. He listened as the cries from the square seemed to grow louder. The mob's current 1-2 combination pounded the walls of the old court building, like fists warming to a heavy bag. The hundreds on the square shouted, "Free Bill! Free Bill! Free Bill!" 2 more high-pitched notifications, ping, ping, as more messages arrived. Sheila glanced at her phone, then said, "It's O'Connor again. He needs to know something." Her voice seemed to have taken on the impatience of the agent. "Should I tell him you need to know where Collins is first? Or that you're considering a bench warrant?" The crowd outside seemed to have plenty left in the tank. "Free Bill! Free Bill!" Balk couldn't willingly add fuel to the crowd's ridiculous demand. Certainly not the narrative they followed. They proclaimed support for the senator without any understanding whatsoever as to who it was that waited beyond the politician's veneer. The people only saw his story, the folk hero's lore, as it slowly built on itself. A few nights in jail served no one other than the accused. If anything, a bench warrant signed by the judge only moved the man one step closer to his ultimate goal. Balk hoped to avoid that. Sheila's frustrated voice pulled him back. "Waiting on you to respond." "I'm not signing a bench warrant at this stage," Balk said, finally dismissing the idea. "It's not appropriate." "Should I make some demand or something about his whereabouts?" she asked, obviously confused. "Anything?" "That agent won't be authorized to disclose anything about where they placed him." Balk tried to sound confident in his blank assumption. "Now look, there are going to be some security interests here, and it'll seem like secrecy with—" Her hand went up to stop him. "I understand the need for secrecy, John. That won't be a problem." The judge considered the layers in his secretary's words. She knew him well. She overheard conversations intended to be private and picked up easily on the unspoken. He knew this to be the inevitable byproduct of the occasional blending of their 2 lives, personal and professional. "I'm talking about the secrecy involved in protecting a U.S. senator." Balk tried to talk as if he really believed such things were necessary on that day. Bill Collins, a hometown boy, right in the midst of another term in Washington, had a reputation for paying anyone who gave him an added measure of control. Security personnel, lawmen, commissioners, even judges. His safety is still going to be the priority in this, Sheila snorted. Our fine senator isn't in any danger today. The judge conceded a nod. The man was untouchable. In fact, she plowed on, those agents should be thinking about some of the other people who might need protecting around here. This courthouse is secure. Have you thought about Maggie? Sheila asked this while she pointed a finger toward the large window facing the square. What's being done to keep one of those crazies at the pep rally from following her home tonight? The judge's secretary kept her eyes on his while he considered the question. In Blake County, a rural southwest Georgia enclave set against the waters of the Chattahoochee River, the local legal community was on a first-name basis with one of the best attorneys in the South. Maggie Reynolds was without equal in her class of trial lawyers, and the relentless courtroom advocate had a brand that was all her own. She took the toughest cases while providing tougher advocacy, even with a target on her back. Maggie doesn't have anything to worry about, Balk replied, although that wasn't entirely true. There'd been threats, plenty of them. The sheriff has his best people watching her around the clock. He knows better than anyone the kind of attention this case has brought to town. Sheila didn't look convinced, but she didn't offer another opinion. Now, Balk said, clapping his hands together, I think we've kept our friends from the federal government waiting long enough. Let's get this show on the road. Sheila nodded to him. They'd worked together long enough for her to voice her honest opinion about the cases that came through the office. It was obvious she didn't agree with his decision to preside over the senator's trial, but she didn't have the power to make that call. Only he did. I'll bring them up myself, she said, starting to pull the door closed. I'm sure they'll have more good news for us. He smiled. That's all for now, Sheila. Yes, Judge. He watched her leave. 3. The judge started toward the leather chair at his desk. He felt the fatigue beginning to set in. Having spent the entire day waiting in his chambers, held hostage inside the eye of the storm, he mostly just wanted the day to end. He knew that wasn't an option, though. Not with the uncertainty swirling outside. Balk dropped into the chair, then leaned back with its familiar tilt. Hanging on the wood-paneled walls, he saw pieces of his life. Diplomas, certificates, photographs of his family and friends, sketches of his favorite hunting dog. They were the foundation of his reputation, one built on sound judgment, some luck, and his own merit. But it all formed a life he felt proud of. All except the peace that had been bought and paid for. The calm ended as another chant stirred outside. Balk smiled at the newest of the mob's demands. As a trained lawyer, of course he respected the citizens' long-standing right to protest. He just preferred it to be done elsewhere. Balk must go! Balk must go! Balk must go! He listened as the mob heckled and shouted, directing its ire toward the historic courthouse. The voices all wanted justice, accountability, and some manner of redress. Most of all, though, the judge knew that the people outside wanted to be heard by the accused, their innocent man. Again, the same demand. Balk must go! Balk must go! The judge stood from his chair and started toward the window. He wanted to remind the protesters, on his square, along with the senator wherever he was, that the Honorable John J. Balk wasn't going anywhere. The crowd could scream and holler and shout, but Balk stood right where he was supposed to be. Balk must go! Balk must go! The chants quieted for a long moment when the judge made it to the large window. Then, smash! Shards of glass peppered the jurist's face. A moment of shock enveloped him and sent a chill down his spine that matched the cool air rushing in through the broken window. Raindrops soon followed and snapped the big man back to the moment. He quickly scanned the floor and found a brick at the center of the room. He stared down at it. more surprised than anything. Anger rose in him. Protesting, ridiculing, complaining. That was all fine, he thought. Now people would go to jail, as many as it took. The judge started for the phone on his desk. He could hear the deputies outside already shouting at the mob to back up. Balk knew the protocol, as did they. All courthouse personnel had to remain in the building, with all doors locked. No exceptions. Balk placed the receiver to his ear, ready to give the order to lock down the building. He didn't hear the phone's dial tone, though. He only heard the shots. Crack, 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 before he hit the ground. 4. Splinters flew from the doorframe as two men forced their way into the judge's chambers. In a matter of seconds, the pair pulled the honorable judge to his feet, all 250 pounds, and had the big man moving fast. They angled toward the door, away from the screams and excitement pouring in through the office's smashed window, then directed the judge toward the rear hallway. Balk's mind started working through a worst-case scenario. He imagined the scene in his head. Mayhem in the streets below, people scattering as they tripped over one another, trying to clear the packed courthouse square. Bullets spraying in all directions. Bodies bleeding out onto the historic brick streets. A massacre, right here in downtown Blakeston. His town. "Keep your head down, sir," shouted one of the men. He held tight to the underside of the judge's arm. His partner gripped the other. They hustled along, ping-ponging the judge back and forth as the trio made its way down the hallway. It was a secure corridor that ran the length of the courthouse, ending in a private stairwell that allowed authorized personnel to exit at the back of the building. "We're taking you with us, Judge." "I can walk, damn it," Balk shouted as he started a protest of his own. He pulled back with one arm, an attempt to break free from his handlers. The men only gripped tighter, though, each digging into the soft tissue near the judge's armpits. "I said I can." "The vehicle isn't far, sir. We'll get you to safety." "I have my own deputies who handle my security. You'll leave me here with them and I'll make sure—" "Negative," the same voice replied, interrupting the judge for the second time. "We need to get you to a secure location. That's on the senator's orders." Balk recognized that the adrenaline from the moment had confused his senses. Unlike the men who flanked him, the judge didn't have any training that prepared him for a moment such as this. "Tell your boss that he and his secure location could kiss my—" "You can tell him yourself, sir. Let's keep moving." There wasn't anything else to be said as the younger, stronger agents shoved through the rear door of the courthouse and maneuvered the judge to a waiting SUV. The black-on-black government-issued getaway vehicle offered no clues as to who waited inside. The tinted windows provided zero visibility, especially under the dark clouds that covered the sky above. "I told you I'm not going anywhere," the judge growled. "I'm responsible for everyone inside that building." 3 more shots clapped off. Crack, crack, crack. The back-to-back-to-back bursts sounded close by, probably somewhere just around the corner of the building. "I'm sorry, Judge, but we've been given our orders," yelled one of the men. He opened the rear door, revealing an empty back seat. "Now get in the vehicle, please." More excitement could be heard as people ran by on the streets. The judge watched them for a short moment, committing the fearful scene to memory, before ducking low to enter the SUV. Water splashed up from the gutter as he stepped between the vehicle and the sidewalk, drenching his dress shoes. He felt the chill of the rainwater as it soaked into his socks, then the first twinges of shame as he accepted their retreat. 2 more doors slammed on the vehicle. "Let's go." The judge leaned back in his seat and exhaled. He wouldn't admit it, never out loud at least, but they needed him safe. Their boss needed him to live. The SUV jerked left, then accelerated away from the curb. Off they went. 5. No one spoke as the SUV sped down several narrow side streets, snaking its way out of Blakeston's historic downtown. Small groups of people, most appearing wet and frazzled, hustled along the brick-cobbled roads on foot. The driver honked at any stragglers that stepped near the roadway, and he did so with a firm touch. the kind that one acquired through driving on the big city streets of urban America. Calm and quiet, like his two comrades who hustled the judge from the courthouse, the driver wore the same standard-issue dark suit, same navy blue tie, black watch around the left wrist. His only accessory, if one even called it that, looked to be the toothpick he flipped back and forth between his teeth. Otherwise, the man behind the wheel appeared to be a carbon copy of the other two nameless faces, seated nearby. "Tell me which one of you is in charge," Balk demanded. "I deserve to know who's running this little extraction." While Balk waited for his response, he again considered the appearances of each agent. He remembered the name O'Connor from earlier discussions, but it gave him little for a profile. All were white, with close-cropped haircuts. No visible shamrock tattoos, no discernible Irish features, no politically incorrect stereotypes to latch onto whatsoever. This left the judge with his gut, and it told him O'Connor rode shotgun. "Tell me where we're going, O'Connor." Balk shook the headrest on the passenger seat in front of him. "If you can't at least do that, then turn this truck around. You can all get prosecuted for going to the airport," offered the man at the wheel. His toothpick clicked as if to punctuate his reply to Balk's empty threat. "We're 8 minutes out, sir." The judge noted the driver's precise response, the provision of only the information that was necessary. These were no-nonsense men, whoever they were, and they clearly operated in an environment that dispensed with the usual concerns that surrounded the legalities of carrying a private citizen against his will. "You boys aren't giving me any options here," Balk said, speaking to the driver. "I don't like that." "We understand, sir." Nothing else. Balk decided he needed to send a message to Sheila, and probably his wife, too. Feeling his pockets for his cell phone, the judge realized he'd left it behind in the scramble from his chambers. A mistake that he guessed might add another layer of panic to an already chaotic situation at the courthouse. "Look," Balk still spoke to the wheelman, "I need to get a call over to my office, but it seems I've left my phone behind." He paused to keep himself from laying blame. "I'm sure you know how these things can be. Certainly better than me, of course. And I don't need anyone worried. You understand?" The driver didn't offer a response. He just casually moved the SUV into the opposite lane of travel and mashed the pedal. They passed 2 cars back to back, traveling at close to triple digits on the speedometer. The driver's hands, steady at 10 and 2, never allowed the SUV to fishtail. In fact, Balk never felt the vehicle wiggle, not once, as they continued their getaway over the wet country roads. Balk turned his attention again to the man who rode shotgun. "Hey, O'Connor, I said I need to borrow a cell phone." No response. Another jiggle of the headrest in front of him. "I know you hear me." "Turn us ahead," the man said, obviously ignoring the judge's antics while he directed the driver. "On your left." "Copy." The judge gave the headrest one more slap, then settled back into his seat to smolder. He soon felt the SUV slow for a left-hand turn. The Blake County Airport. A small, uncontrolled airfield began to appear from behind a stand of tall pine trees. The agent in the front passenger seat turned as best he could. Suddenly willing to interact with the judge, he began speaking over his shoulder. "We're pulling up to the local airport, sir. We'll be heading to the large hangar. It's save the commentary," Balk replied. "I know where we are." Quick and polite, he responded, "Of course, sir. I see now that I should have pegged you as a fellow aviator." Balk nearly corrected the agent, but for his ego and all. No, he wasn't a pilot, nor did his judicial salary afford him enough to charter private flights. Not even close. He flew several times each year out of the small airport, though. Another local lawyer invited him up on occasion to curry favor, usually a simple up and back to Atlanta for a ball game. And a Bahamas trip happened annually, usually to chase fish with old friends, all doctors, of course, who had partnered together on an aging jet. Glamorous trips, at least by local standards. Balk stared out the window of the SUV. He remembered visiting the airport as a boy, soon after it opened. It had been nothing more than a piece of converted farmland, with parking under the shade of a few oak trees and a single wide that served as an office. The pilots were few, but Balk remembered them as real, larger-than-life characters. The kind of men who learned to fly when the country called on them to hunt down fighters with bullet-ridden swastikas, or to down Zeros, emblazoned with the flag of the rising sun. Over the years, though, as the airport continued to grow, the pilot community moved beyond just crop dusters and the legends he'd admired. The more affluent took to flying lessons, and the Joneses began adding Cessnas to their ever-growing list of assets. In a sense, the well-to-do took that old airfield, like anything that served them, then shaped it for their own purpose. Balk looked back to the front of the vehicle. "Y'all aren't going to put me on a flight, are you?" One never knew with the senator, because that had better not be the plan. No one responded to the question. All three suits just kept their eyes on the path ahead as the SUV maneuvered through a small parking lot, slowing only to wait for the automatic gate to open at the edge of the airfield. As they waited, the driver's eyes moved to the rearview mirror and found the judge. Another flip of the toothpick. "I asked a question." Balk held eye contact with the driver as he spoke. The judge had a reputation for being able to easily intimidate those who entered his courtroom. He wasn't used to people not answering him when he spoke. "Are you planning to put me on a flight somewhere?" Gritted teeth. "Sir, that?" Balk stopped him. "Goodness, son. Lose that damn toothpick when you speak to me." A pause. Then he pulled the stick out with his index finger and thumb. "That's not the plan for today." "And where's that cell phone I asked for?" Balk pressed. "I'm told your office is aware of the situation." "What's that supposed to mean?" He paused for a moment, then spoke slowly. "That your office is aware of the situation, sir." It was obvious to the judge that these men weren't authorized to give him anything more. Irritated, he leaned back and returned his attention to the surrounding airport, an operation that had expanded greatly over recent years. The now less rural airfield included a handsome terminal, 3 sizable hangars, and a pair of wide runways perfectly suited to accommodate larger aircraft. Everything had been modernized, thanks in large part to a chunk of federal money that conveniently found its way down from Washington, D.C. The luxury and expansion primarily benefited the well-to-do, but most voters in the area still viewed the updates as a win for the people and praised the man responsible, Senator Bill Collins. All hail Collins. 6. The SUV rolled to a stop inside the large hangar. On one side of the building, a row of single-engine aircraft waited patiently for the skies to clear. Balk recognized a few of the manufacturers in the lineup: Piper, Cessna, Beechcraft. The small planes had nowhere to be, unlike the sleek jet that mocked them from the other side of the hangar. The gold-striped bombardier, newly waxed, ready for the prom, looked out of place among its smaller brethren. Like the conceited jock at the wrong high school party, the high-end machine had been parked off to the side. The beautiful plane seemed to be beckoning its admirers, Balk included, enticing them to come check it out, climb the shiny stairs, step through the plane's open door, explore the lavish interior. No one on the outside even needed to know. Inside the SUV, still admiring the jet, Balk knew who it belonged to. "I'm Special Agent Collier O'Connor," began the man seated in the back seat. His accent fit the name. "I'm assigned to Senator Collins's protective detail, and I'll be accompanying you onto the aircraft for the meeting." "I appreciate the introduction, O'Connor." Balk didn't skimp on sarcasm as he looked the 30-something agent over. As the youngest of the three, he'd offered 0 words during their short ride over. Balk mistakenly pegged him low man on the totem pole.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?